The state would want to hear me say this, but if
But he's going to tell us anyway. Now, did you know that you can get your diesel to pass emissions even with certain check engine lights on? Neither did I. In this video, we discuss all the resourceful ways to get your diesel to pass your state emissions tests, as well as some new changes that are really going to make it easier for you as a diesel owner to repair your diesel. These are very real federal changes which will be rolling out soon. More importantly, changes that will affect your right to repair in the near future. So if you've been frustrated by your state's emission tests, this video is for you. Now, California is known to be the toughest state for emissions tests. I used to think I understood what they wanted, what they expected, how it worked, and all that's until I had this discussion with Scott. Scott here runs his own YouTube channel, and he used to do emissions testing back in the day.
yeah, exactly, there is absolutely no tailpipe emissions test on the diesel. So
today we're going to break some common myths, such as this one.
you actually can buy a vehicle, a federal certified vehicle in another state in a year and bring it to California. When we perform a smog inspection, it asks what this vehicle is certified to, California or federal. We can smog it as a federal vehicle. So there's a big perception that I hear often is that you can't, or if you buy a vehicle in Nevada, well, I bet Nevada has CARB compliant, Montana or something like that, and bring it to California, it's going to be a federal emissions vehicle. It still can enter the state. It just can't be originally sold in the state of California.
So we're going to go ahead and debunk a whole lot of myths around these tests. Now, even though these are California standards, there are also standards and practices which have been adopted by a whole lot of other states. So if you have emissions tests in your state, this likely applies to you. Remember, California is one of the hardest states to pass, so if you understand how vehicles pass here, you can likely just about pass anywhere. Can a modified diesel pass a smog test here in California?
Yes, but there's going to be a lot of different rules to that.
Can I take one of those chip tuners that plugs right into my OBD2 port and plug it in there? You know, maybe it remaps the ECU temporarily, drive my diesel truck or van around, and can it pass a smog with that thing in? Do I need to unplug it first and pass the smog and plug it back in? What does that look like?
They do make CARB legal plug and play tuners. Those ones, of course, are legal. You could run those while the smog is going on. But if you're not too modified, detune it before you bring it in.
I'm just going to ask this one anyway. Are all the smog tests going away in a few weeks and everyone's going to be modifying their exhaust and doing crazy tunes and everything's going to be an amazing playground for all the diesel owners like everyone's claiming on YouTube?
That is, I'm calling it the tailpipe dream right now. In my opinion, it's not going away anytime soon. There is other legislation out there, such as the Stop CARB Act or Transportation Freedom Act. If those pass, then it's going to be free game.
One of the reasons I thought you'd be an extremely interesting individual to talk to is, unlike all the other channels out there who've kind of been clickbaiting recently, I'd argue, they're giving sort of their highly opinionated ideas on what they expect or would like to happen soon.
Exactly.
It seems like every diesel channel is just like bringing it up. Oh yeah, everything's going to change. It's going to be crazy. Your channel's kind of looking at it a little more nuanced. You have a background in the topic, which I'm sure we'll discuss in a second. You approach things on a more factual basis and really try and figure out, take a look at the legislation that's actually trying to get passed, looking at all that a little more nuanced. So that's one of the reasons I thought this might be interesting.
Yeah. I do my best to make sure it's actual factual stuff rather than give my opinion of what I want to happen and base it on everything that I think or want is going to happen is going to happen. I like to see what is actually written down on paper rather than what hearsay is. So that I try to do my best on that.
Yeah. So for those of you, for the viewers who don't yet know who you are, you know, you have this awesome YouTube channel with a bunch of informative automotive videos. Go ahead and just introduce yourself. Let the viewers know who you are.
I'm Scott from Scotty's Hobbies. The channel originally got started out as me being a smog technician, showing component locations to help people get a starting point of what to start looking at on their vehicle. It's if they had a problem. It's evolved into more of a DIY approach on helping you repair the vehicle. So check engine lights, how to test components, locations on a bunch of stuff, brakes, DIY brakes, complete step-by-step with torque specifications, trying to go into detail on that. And lately you've been getting into this smog legislation because due to all of the smog component locations and information I have on my channel, I started getting a lot. I didn't even know anything was going on. I started getting a lot of comments about my channel pretty much being irrelevant because nobody's going to be smogging their car anymore, which dropped me into doing all this research and seeing what's really going on.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're one of the few sort of voices of truth on, like you said, what's really going on.
Yeah, I do my best.
Yeah, as you probably know, my channel primarily works with modern European diesels that are in the Sprinter vans, the Mercedes Sprinter diesel. Not that it's too unique. Most people think it's a super unique engine and everything, but really they're all around Europe and pretty much everything. And essentially what most people don't realize now is that any modern diesel from like the big three, whether it's Power Stroke, Cummins, or Duramax right now, you're going to have very similar components to the Mercedes ones, from the Bosch fuel delivery system to the air intake system, turbochargers, pretty much everything. Now, with that said, could you start by kind of giving us a detailed idea, to the best of your knowledge, because I know you haven't smogged things in a few years.
Correct.
What's kind of the step-by-step process these modern diesels go through to pass smog?
So pretty much go through a smog inspection. When a vehicle comes in, really we look at the underhood label, see what components are supposed to be on that vehicle. DPF, the CATs, EGRs, whatever your underhood label lists, we verify that that is on your vehicle and does not appear to be modified. And really with diesels, it's only a visual inspection and the OBD2 inspection with a quick snap of the throttle to check for smoke. And then it's a pretty basic test. It's not too intrusive, not intrusive at all, honestly. It's a fairly easy test to pass, in my opinion. As long as everything visually looks good, usually it passes.
Great. Yeah. So, all right. Sounds like you look under the hood. There's a label list that says what it's equipped with. And now, again, as a smog technician, you're seeing hundreds of different engine styles per day. How in depth is it usually? Are they like, okay, EGR, I'm going to locate exactly where that is. Is there just kind of like, oh yeah, EGR looks like it's there. Do you look at the exhaust system? Do most techs look at that in depth? Do they check every single exhaust component to make sure it says carb certified? So what's the level of detail there? Yeah.
We do visually look at it. So it says EGR. We just get a flashlight, usually shine the flashlight on there. If the EGR is there, it doesn't look like there's a block off plate or anything under it, it's good. We're not going to go through and make sure all the wires are good, make sure it functionally works. If it's there, it's there. Catalytic converter, DPF wise, we're just going to look under the vehicle, make sure it visually looks like it's there. We don't do too much more into does it actually work. As long as it's visually there. Sometimes we'll use a mirror. At the last shop I worked at, we had these really long mirrors with lights on them, and we could just slide it under the truck, see that it's there. Okay, you're good to go. They don't expect this test to last too long. These diesel inspections usually take about 10 minutes, really 15 minutes at most. You're in and out. So just imagine how much you can look into at that time. We're just seeing if it's on there. Don't scrutinize the customer too much about it. And I was personally not there to prove somebody wrong. If I saw a component on there that was listed on the underhood label, it was good to me. But you're going to run into other technicians that maybe care more, I guess you could say, or having a bad day. And if they see something out of the ordinary, pretty much fail it because they just don't know what they're looking at.
Okay, so suppose a technician believes and we'll get into this detail a little more. A technician believes it to be modified in some way. Is there any level of reporting, or is it just, oh, hey, it failed, come back when XYZ is fixed?
So on the smog inspection, we have three different criterias: pass, fail, or modified. No matter what we do on the smog inspection input, it doesn't red flag you to, a lot of people think if you fail for some reason or fail X amount of times, you're going to be sent to a referee center. That's not true. Um, you could fail under a modified under every single category, and you would have to go get that fixed, repaired back to normal, bring it back to me, the smog tech, or that station, or another station. It doesn't matter, to get it certified, to get it to pass.
Essentially, you have multiple tries at this, and they're not too concerned with finding modified vehicles as they are with getting them essentially off the road, it sounds like, or like getting them moved back to stock, at least, so to speak. Would that be fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
So they're not okay. All right, let's dial it back a little bit. I know my viewers are kind of have a broad range of technical knowledge when it comes to all this stuff. So we're going to kind of start at a very lower level and build our way up to the more exciting, interesting stuff in a bit. Now, I'm sure you've dealt with customers in the past, especially early 2000s was probably the worst for the sprinters between like the years 2010 and 2013. First gen SCR, that's the diesel exhaust fluid and that whole system, and their first generation of that was problematic to say the least. And there's been class action lawsuits against Mercedes and Bosch that have won. All that to say, I'm sure you've dealt with customers who have had headaches where you're like, all right, maybe your drive cycle monitors aren't complete yet, go drive it 50 miles or 100 miles or however long it takes and bring it back, and maybe a customer's coming back multiple times. Tell me a bit about the experience the customer has. Is there a lot of frustration around that?
There is. So I've been smogging since 2003 is when I originally got my smog license. When it comes to monitors after a repair or after a battery replacement, I've never actually ran into a problem with a Sprinter itself not setting monitors. I haven't smogged a great amount of them. I have smogged them before for sure, but we do run into customers to where, like you said, they just had repairs done or they just replaced the battery. They come to me for a smog, and you smog the vehicle and it fails for incomplete monitors for OBD2 system check. They'll go drive the vehicle. I do my best to recommend how I would drive a vehicle to get monitors set, which would be keep a half a tank of gas in there or fuel, make sure your coolant temp sensor works properly, and cruise the vehicle around 60 to 65 miles an hour for 20 to 30 miles, and get off the road, turn the vehicle off, turn it back on, and bring it back. A lot of times that sets, but you do run into very frustrating vehicles to where they won't set the monitors, or they're not easy to set the monitors. And there's times you run into the customer or tell the customer, it's like, really, I'm looking at your computer, I'm not seeing any pending codes, I can't recommend a fix. All I can say is drive it. And then you get into the people who say, I've drove this thing 500 miles, when is it going to set? And the frustration comes out on us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at that point, there's nothing that I could recommend for them to do other than continue to drive the vehicle at a normal pace and continue to bring it back. The state really wants to see us smog those vehicles every time so they could get a reading of what's happening. But usually we would grab a little handheld scan tool and check the monitors before we did the test to make sure that the monitors have set. So we're not wasting their money. It's just more so wasting their time, which still sucks. But it's a little bit of a try to help when it's coming to set the monitors. They can be very frustrating.
Yeah. Now, obviously, over the last 15 plus years, the access we have now to affordable yet powerful scan tools, the scan tools seem to be dropping exponentially almost each year.
Yeah.
Right? For the majority of people, I'd say, just get a scan tool, There's scan tools that are, 50 or $100 that can check the monitors on sprinters at least. Most of them might be up in like north of that 200 range, but ultimately, that would you say that could possibly at least reduce a whole lot of the frustration, a lot of the trips back and forth to any smog shop for the most part?
I very much so.
Yeah.
Yes. Little handheld scanners are very helpful when it comes to smogging vehicles or make sure they pass. This one is one I just loan to people when they're trying to get their computer to set monitors. This plugs right in on the top of it. It has little circles on it to let you know what monitors are set or incomplete or not even applicable for the vehicle. And this thing was $50 on Amazon. There are some Bluetooth ones out there that are a little bit more advanced, but you could find very cheap ones out there. If you're just trying to set monitors, there's some down in the $20 range. And all my vehicles, I keep those in all my vehicles. So if I ever get a check engine light on, I plug that thing right in, make sure it's not something that could be harmful to the vehicle, and continue driving. If it's something I need to pull over or go to a parts store and fix it, I will. If it's like an evap code or something like that, nothing to worry about at the time, and I can worry about that at a later date. But they're very affordable scan tools. Handheld ones like that are very, very handy when you're especially trying to pass smog and trying to set monitors, so you don't have to waste your time coming back to me. Yeah, when I had my smog shops, I even loaned those out. I got bit in the butt a few times, I guess you could say, loaning those out because they never made it back. But
Right.
For what it is, I helped them out.
That's that's very nice of you. Yeah. Yeah, very trusting, I would say. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
that's I'd buy cheap ones and just loan them out. And often, I'd say I probably lost like 10 of them or more.
Yeah. Well, choosing to trust people can always be tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you mentioned drive cycle monitors being non-applicable. I want to touch on that. I do also want to touch on, I had a Mercedes, had a Sprinter here in California I only had to get it smogged once back in 2018. And you were right. It was just a 10-minute in and out. I even had like a pending code at that point, and I didn't quite understand all the systems perfectly at that point, but it still passed. Are certain diesels from certain years allowed to have maybe one drive cycle monitor being incomplete, or do you know anything about that?
I believe
Yeah.
on diesels, all of the drive cycle monitors have to be set. If you have a pending code with set monitors, they usually pass. I haven't passed. I haven't seen that issue. If you have a hard set or a hard set code that's not causing a check engine light, but it's in the computer on the newer vehicles, 2015 and newer, those ones are still failing though.
Interesting. So you're telling me you could have a code that's not triggering a check engine light that could possibly fail your smog, did I
Yes.
understand that right? Yeah, that's
No,
interesting.
100%. For instance, I ran into it was a 2015 Ram 1500. I forget the code we were chasing, but we fixed the code. I erased the computer to reset the monitors. We got the monitors to set. He took it in for an inspection, and it still failed because of that hard set code that was in the history. It wasn't a pending, it was just a hard set. Uh, and all we had to do on that one was just drive it more. But I was very surprised that one failed because that hard set code was in there, even with all the monitors set and the check engine light not activated.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely an oddball. Since we're discussing engine codes causing a pass or fail on emissions tests, I'm going to include a link down below to a specific page on the California BAR website, Bureau of Automotive Repair's website, which shows you all the specific codes that you're allowed to have and still pass your smog. These are very specific to makes, models, and year ranges. There is, of course, specific sprinters in there, which recognize that there are certain codes that you're allowed to pass smog with. They recognize those as codes being more associated with faulty ECU updates rather than issues with your emission system. Check the link below to see if your vehicle falls within one of these exceptions. I mentioned I was in California for a while, moved to Texas. For diesels in Texas, it's kind of your statement about the tailpipe dream is alive and well, so to speak, over there. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we can discuss that later on. Essentially, all you do every year is you pay $7 for a safety inspection, seat belts, tail lights, that stuff, and they send you on your way. They don't plug in anything in. They don't do any dyno tests. They don't check your exhaust or anything like that. You can have an active, your dash could look like a Christmas tree with all kinds of warning lights and check engine lights and all that, as long as the safety stuff works that they check. Right? I don't know the exact list, but it's the stuff most cars should have, right? Like lights and all that stuff. Right. So that's all they do there. So it was two very different worlds. Now, I do want to discuss this hypothetical scenario. Suppose someone brings a Sprinter or any modern diesel, but we'll talk about Sprinters because that's what my channel's about. They bring their Sprinter in from out of state. Maybe they have their ECU modified. There's no codes or anything, but the fact that they have their ECU modified. Let me be a little more precise here. The drive cycle monitoring for certain components is essentially deactivated, or like it just says not equipped instead of pass, fail, pending. It'll just show that line item, and I'll put a graphic up on the screen of what those line items could look like. It'll just say not equipped. It sounds like, I know we talked a little bit about this over the phone earlier, but it sounds like, tell us a bit about how California smog catches those, because I think that's really interesting.
That is a check that started in 2020. It's a CVN check. I put a little bit more research into it, and what they're checking for is the calibration ID number and the calibration verification number in the computers. So those two numbers are what creates a pass-fail criteria for the state. If either one of those are modified, that is what creates or causes the vehicle to fail for a modified computer. In the past, I know what you're talking about with the readiness monitors being deactivated pretty much. Those used to pass. And I don't know, I'm not too much of a tuner. I'm not a tuner at all. I don't know if you could alter the computer and leave the calibration ID number and the calibration verification number in there and detune other parts of it. If you could, I would think you could probably get around it. But what it says on the California bar website for the pass-fail criteria is it's checking for the calibration ID number and the calibration verification number.
Okay, those are two terms that I'm not entirely familiar with. Can you tell me how those terms originated, what they're used for? Are they used to compare other ECUs that are similar with each other, or is it, maybe expand on it a little bit more?
This is a little bit more of an assumption given understanding how the rest of the smog inspection program works, is they will pull information out of that exact year, make, model, or they'll have that information. That'll be put into an algorithm. So they'll be able to compare other smogs to those vehicles. So if it doesn't match all the other vehicles, they're going to say, hey, what's going on here? Why does this one have a different ID number compared to all of these other ones? And I believe that's how they get their pass-fail criteria on that. I can't guarantee that though, but given the experience of how they use algorithms to see if smog shops are not performing properly, that's how they do it. They say these 90% of these cars are being tested at this RPM, this heat range, this timing, but all of your cars are coming through at a different specification or a different reading. Like, why is that? And that's what causes the state to go look into these shops.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. Because we won't get into that too much.
No, yeah.
Yeah, got questions there. All right, let me just.
That was for a stick of the spokes.
Yeah, that sort of spawned a whole bunch of other questions. Let's circle back to that quick RPM smoke test. Now, you said they don't stick anything up your exhaust for diesels, at least not yet. It's really just kind of more of a visual, as long as it doesn't look like it's rolling coal. so to speak, right? A lot of black smoke or
Exactly.
white smoke, you're probably good there, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's do this hypothetical scenario. Suppose someone's has a their injectors are really old and maybe they're not performing right. So maybe they are smoking a little more than they should. Let me back it up a little bit. How often does someone fail their diesel? Does someone fail their smog for that reason? Is it pretty rare, or is it like, oh yeah, 1 out of every 10 have too much smoke, or it's a pretty arbitrary sort of like, if you know, if it's not crazy, it'll be okay, or
In my opinion, it's a pretty rare fail to fail on smoke, unless, like you said, you're rolling coal, you're coming in just constantly smoking. What we do for the test is snap the throttle to about 3,000 RPM, just real quick. We're watching the tailpipe, and I believe it's around 20 seconds the smoke has to dissipate. If you're excessively blowing smoke out of the tailpipe, you're going to fail. And this is another part of the smog inspection that is, you're going to get, if you have a little bit of smoke coming out of your tailpipe, uh, white smoke, black smoke, whatever color smoke it is, it's going to vary on the technician. Because
mm,
one technician could say you have smoke, period, coming out. And the other technician could say, well, it dissipates within the 20 seconds, you're fine. And another technician could say, come on a windy day and it goes away really fast. But the rule is to snap the throttle, watch for smoke, and if it dissipates within, I believe it's 20 to 30 seconds, you're good to go.
gotcha. Now, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here since it's a very rare fail, but hypothetically, if someone was to maybe ensure they have a lot of additives in their fuel and maybe do a 30 minute ride on the freeway so that everything's nice and hot, could that potentially decrease the likelihood of seeing some forms of like excessive soot blowing out the exhaust? Or is that, it's hypothetical, but I'm just thinking if there was that 1 in 100 person who's dealing with this issue, how would they pass it?
The state would want to hear me say this, but if there is an additive out there that can make your vehicle stop smoking for a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
use it. If it takes getting out there, getting it really hot to get it to clean up, do it. The state wants us to just smog your vehicle. So imagine going to a store or the mall or dropping your kids off at school. The state wants us to smog a vehicle as such as that. Like we're not supposed to do anything special to it to warm it up or anything like that. And we're not supposed to encourage the customer to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But helping somebody out as trying to be friendly, if there's an additive out there that will get that smoke to go away, and or getting it hot will cause the smoke to be minimal,
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for it. In my opinion, do what you got to do to get around the smog. But technically, it's should just be a normal drive simulation for a
Mm.
smog inspection.
Yeah. And I and again, this is getting a little theoretical, but I think
Yeah,
biodiesel could probably decrease that black smoke a little bit, even though it'll probably up the NOx levels, which it doesn't sound like it's testing for at that moment, as long as, it's, yeah. So that could possibly be another solution. But again, that's probably
yeah.
too far out
There's
into
no
theory to really be helpful for anyone, but maybe that one person out there,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. There is absolutely no tailpipe emissions test on the diesel. So if you're increasing NOx for a little bit, obviously it's not the best thing in the world to do,
Hmm.
but there's no way for the state or for the smog technician, sorry, to see that raise in emissions because
Hmm.
it's just a visual test when it comes to tailpipe on diesels.
Awesome. Interesting. We do discuss modified diesels, but keep in mind this video is not about how to cheat on your emissions, but rather really trying to understand what these governing bodies are looking for, as well as really trying to understand how these tests work. The big issue for Sprinter vans is maybe someone puts the wrong oil in it for too many times and it poisons the DPF filter. It gets sort of permanently clogged, so to speak, in a way that the regens won't clean it out. Now, if you go on eBay or something, you'll see all these very affordable aftermarket DPF filters for Sprinter vans. Pretty much none of them ship it to California. Now, suppose someone gets their DPF changed at a shop out of state. They decide they're moving to California for one reason or another. They happen to have that aftermarket DPF filter. That's not changing anything from a technician's perspective. They're going to check and see if something that looks like a DPF or a cat, it's essentially looks like a cat from the outside. I mean, like most people just call it a cat anyway, or they assume it's one.
Yeah.
Especially those who are cutting them off or stealing
Yeah.
them, right? They're stealing something that's useless. But anyway, those aftermarket ones aren't necessarily going to cause any issues from the technician's perspective. What's your opinion? What are your thoughts on that?
If they're supposed to be CARB approved,
Mm-hmm.
if it's a CARB approved replacement part, it will need to have a CARB number on it, even if it was installed out of the state. Not on this particular type of vehicle, but I've had where somebody moved in from Nevada. They had catalytic converters put on their vehicle because they were cut off. They came to California. They moved to California shortly thereafter, and they failed because they were not CARB compliant catalytic converters. They were aftermarket that were installed after 2010. So that makes them eligible to be required to have CARB numbers. So if it's installed out of state and you bring it into the state and it's supposed to have a CARB number, it doesn't matter where it was installed, it will need a CARB number.
So would that, in that specific situation, was failed from a visual inspection, or it
Correct.
failed? Okay. So
the technician would have to catch it and see that there is no CARB number on there. If it looked like the rest of the exhaust, a technician might even miss it and just pass it as a factory DPF.
Gotcha.
If they know what they're looking at, or if for some reason they get a wild hair and want to look at everything and then see that it is an aftermarket, it would fail as modified. In that case, you would just replace it, put a factory one on, or a CARB compliant part, return for a smog inspection, and pass.
Gotcha. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the larger, newer SUVs, the ones that are approved in California, their emissions are a little, the cats and everything are a little bigger and a little different from possibly the ones that exist in other states. Is that, you know what I'm talking
True.
about? Some of them will say, I mean, there's vehicles that are driving in other states that you can't really take them to California and register them, right? I mean, it won't. Yeah. Or how does that work?
You actually can buy a vehicle, a federal certified vehicle in another state any year and bring it to California. When we perform a smog inspection, it asks what this vehicle is certified to, California or federal. We can smog it as a federal vehicle. So there's a big perception that I hear often is that you can't, or if you buy a vehicle in Nevada, well, I bet Nevada has CARB compliant, Montana or something like that, and bring it to California, it's going to be a federal emissions vehicle. It still can enter the state. It just can't be originally sold in the state of California.
That is probably one of the biggest misperceptions that I think a lot of people have. I believe that till this day, you know, under the hood. It's not true for diesels. I think diesels are like all 50 states, no matter what they should be. But yeah, some vehicles will say, you know, approved, doesn't say all 50 states. It will say 48 states or something, you know, maybe California and Hawaii. I don't remember what the other real strict one is. But yeah, that's so interesting. So you're saying as long as the vehicle's not considered new by a California standard, like maybe it's a few years old, you're allowed to own a vehicle didn't originally have a CARB compliance, bring it into the state and get it smogged the way you described it.
Yes, so it could pass under federal emissions. The downside is if your catalytic converter gets stolen on a Fed emissions vehicle, you'd still have to get a CARB compliant catalytic converter, even though it is a Fed emissions vehicle. Stuff like that, you would have to go for or aftermarket parts, I should say, period, would have to be CARB compliant. But it doesn't mean our federal emissions vehicle just can't be originally sold in California. You could go out of state by a 2025 right now, register it initially at a address out of state, and then do a transfer of ownership into the state, and you can bring that vehicle into the state of California.
How many people do you think actually know that? Because
Not many. I get that question a lot, honestly.
yeah.
They tell me that you can't bring cars here, and I'm like, no, I've done it. Like I've seen cars. Like I used to smog a lot of cars for dealerships, and
Uh-huh.
they would go to like Las Vegas because there's a ton of cars for sale over there for some reason, and they would ship them here. A lot of them would just be federal emissions, and I would just enter federal emissions and perform the smog inspection as it is. Even federal emissions vehicles, they have emissions equipment. You're not going to find a modern federal emissions vehicle without a catalytic converter, without an EGR valve. That's what tier 3 emissions for federal emission standards requires, all that stuff too. So it's not a huge difference on the compliance for feds compared to California. And I'd say most of the cars probably in the United States, if you look, are California certified that are 2010 and newer. Most of them are, I would say, California certified. It'll probably be harder to find a federally certified vehicle that's newer than 2010.
Real quick, can you expand on what tier 3 federal compliance means for us viewers?
I was just comparing tier 3 to the California emission standards, just in case we rolled back in California to federal emissions, we would roll back on to tier 3. And I was just looking to see what tier 3 caused emissions components wise, what would need to be on the vehicle for a vehicle to be sold, which would still be catalytic converter, EGR valve, oxygen sensors, pretty much everything that California requires at this time needs to be on a tier 3 federally certified vehicle. The difference is going to be tailpipe emissions, but even in California, we don't measure tailpipe emissions on a OBD2 certified vehicle that's 2000 and newer. So tailpipe wise, I didn't look too much into that. It doesn't matter, I felt like. I just wanted to see what components were on the vehicles on a tier 3 federal emissions compared to the California emissions vehicles. Tier 4, I looked that up a little bit. A lot of people are saying that tier 4 is really strict and it's the same as California standards. And I also thought that in the beginning, but it looks like tier 4 is more focused on industrial emission pollutions rather than vehicle emissions pollutions and big rigs and stuff like that.
Gotcha. And is tier 4 kind of rolling out in the next couple of years? Do they have a scheduled rollout for it like they did?
I believe tier 4 started rolling out in 24, or it's going to start rolling out in 26, but it's fairly new.
Okay.
I don't exactly know for sure, but if it didn't start in 24, it's starting in 26.
And you're saying that's not going to touch what's considered the light duty commercial vehicles, like most diesel trucks and vans out there. That's probably not gonna get there.
I could be wrong, but from the information I found and looked up, I didn't see that the tier 4 affected light duty and medium duty vehicles. Like I said, it was more towards industrial type vehicles and industrial pollution from factories and such like that. Gotcha.
Yeah, I think California is probably the only state that categorizes these vans, and I think almost all trucks, like pickup style trucks, as medium duty, even though they're classified as light duty in pretty much every other state. Is that the case? Do you know? Or
for certification of weight wise,
I believe I guess it's a weight thing. I'm actually probably speaking outside of my zone of knowledge here a bit.
Anything over, I believe it's 8,501 pounds, 8,501 pounds is what California considers medium duty.
Okay, and are we talking curb weight or gross vehicle weight?
I believe it'd be gross vehicle weight.
Ah, okay. That's interesting. That's where it is, because most of the sprinters, you have like the 2500s and 3500s.
Yeah.
Ask me why they're called 2500s and 3500s when they're European vehicles and they're not called that anywhere else. But That's another story. They're very cautious. Even like the biggest, baddest 3500 will say like 9 GVR is like 9,990 pounds, right? They want to stay under that 10,000 pound limit because I think
Yeah.
then you need all that other stuff. Anyway, that's probably outside of this this discussion. There was a viral video going around of that factory deleted PowerStroke 6.7, which was made for the military, right? Had 0 emissions on it, capped off EGRs. Everything was just gutted, right? If a vehicle like that, or that's categorized from the, was created with that level of emissions from stock, from the manufacturers. If that vehicle ever made it into California, could you smog it? Do you have to smog it? What kind of exceptions do vehicles like that have?
That one's actually a really hard one to answer because that is factory built like that for the government. I would not think that one would be very easy to get legal here in California. I would honestly have to see what the underhood label is saying, what needs to be on there. And we could only certify a vehicle to what the underhood label is. But there might be a rule to where something like that they just won't allow here, because I know what you're talking about, where that video is maybe 2 years old, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And people at work were showing me that too. That one I can't say that one could come to California. My normal job is I work for the government, and our heavy duty vehicles, like the Ram, or not the Ram, but like the cats that they use to penetrate buildings and stuff, the police. All of ours actually have the emissions equipment on them.
Oh, that's super interesting. Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
there's this discuss, and I know a few things like military vehicles obviously are exempt. I think pretty much most government vehicles have them. I think there's a miss. Yeah, so most government agencies can't. It's very few that have that exception for emissions, right? I think there's kind of a misconception around that, or maybe there's not. Maybe you could speak to that.
I would think it pertains more towards vehicles that were meant for more type military use. But that video in particular that you're talking about, that was not, it didn't look like a militarized truck. It looked more like just a heavy duty diesel truck driving around. That's on that one kind of confused me a little bit, because the militarized vehicles that I'm familiar with that we have here in California, ours have them. Our fire trucks even have emissions components on them, but I don't know how that one hit the streets, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not too unreasonable to think maybe it hit a government auction somewhere. I don't want to discuss it too much, but
Yeah, I was baffled when somebody showed me that one. Even for like a Texas standard, I don't even know where it was at, but I know Texas, they don't care about any of that stuff. Even if it was there, I'm like, I don't even know how in the world this would even be sold to the general public. But it's that one's an anomaly, in my opinion. You're not going to find too many of those, and that was one reason why I think he posted that video or showed that truck off, and you didn't see anybody else say, "Hey, I have that too." Factory. It was all people taking their truck or modifying their trucks to be like that. I never saw one comment looking at those, because I was trying to dig into it. I'm like, where did this come from? Just more information about it. And I couldn't find very much information. I didn't see anybody else mentioning that they had that same type of vehicle too.
I guess it makes you question whether it was really a factory delete. I don't know. Maybe it. Who knows?
Yeah, but it's on the internet, so you have to believe it. It's right. So
sure.
That's why I was trying to do some research, just trying to figure more stuff out about it, because I'm like, this is kind of nuts, actually. But you never know. It could have been, and somebody could have known somebody that could have known somebody that hooked up a person, and they hit the streets.
Yeah, interesting. One of the sort of core ideas around my channel is making sure everyone can fix their vans if they choose to. And that kind of runs into this idea of right to repair. When it comes to scan tools and everything, I'll take myself as an example. I have a Mercedes factory scan tool, the exact same thing they use at the dealerships, with the exception of the access to the online system. Because you got to pay, I think it's well over north of $10,000 for a yearly. It's, you know, it's something that's not manageable for most shops. One of the only things I can't do is what's called ECN coding. And usually where that runs into emissions is with the derate mode and the AdBlue systems, because the NOx sensors are really NOx sensors with modules attached to them, and they kind of have to be serialized to the rest of the system, the ECU and all that. I did notice, I think big rigs have the same system with a starts counter and quote kind of a derate mode where you can only go 5 miles an hour once you run out of starts. Most people think you run out of starts, you can't start it, but you can start it, but you just can't really go anywhere. Are there federal regulations around that? Is that just the manufacturer being restrictive because they want to take all that repair money and put it in their pockets? I get why it's not necessarily accessible to everyone, because then people would just kind of reset their counters over and over again. Can you shed any light on that at all?
I would think that's more of a manufacturer requirement or want. The federal EPA and California are only going to regulate that they need to reduce NOx by X. They're not going to say you have to put this on the vehicle. The government, when they make up their requirements, they just say we have to reduce the emissions by this much. You guys figure it out, and then allow the manufacturers to go do what they need to do to lower the emissions to get to that standard. So in that case, I would think that's more of a manufacturer requirement rather than a government requirement, due to, like I said, the government's just requiring that the emissions need to come down. They're not requiring that how they have to come down.
Interesting. Yeah, I kind of had a hunch that it was Mercedes being
Proprietary, they want to keep it theirs.
right, limiting everyone from being able to fix their own vehicles. And I mentioned this in other videos, but like even the new headlight units now, you can't replace your own headlight unit. You have to serialize it to the vehicle. That's how restrictive things get. So that's interesting. Yeah. So it's likely going to be Mercedes or whatever the manufacturer is that's causing that restrictive behavior, and essentially at the end of the day limiting your right to repair. Because at the end of I can do like 99.9% of all the repairs on a Mercedes diesel, but getting that one is really, really tough, and that's generally the one at least 2010 plus sprinters have that issue with. So that's a real thorn in my side, so to speak. Just this month, August 2025, there were announcements that the DEF diesel exhaust fluid system on modern diesels, there's going to be certain federal regulations allowing the individual to fix it. So this is a huge, assuming I understand everything right, this is a huge win for you and for right to repair in general. Keep in mind it's not rolled out yet, but when it does, I'll be making a video on it and posting it here. This is a really huge win because it covers that last little percentage point of things I couldn't do up until now. As an individual who can fix just about everything on the Sprinter, there was this one thing that I really couldn't fix, and it seems like we're going to get access to that now. So it's going to be really exciting what that looks like. Again, I'll have a video linked here or in the description.
Yeah, that was I would put money on that's more of a manufacturer thing than anything else.
Now, I know the U.S. has, this is going to sidestep to a slightly different topic. The U.S. has certain classic car exemptions, right? I think 20 years or 25 years. I think it's 20 years. You're allowed to import cars from Europe, and they don't have to necessarily match up to federal emission standards. Is that correct?
I wouldn't have too much knowledge on that.
Okay.
In California, we call them gray market vehicles. And generally, if they didn't have a United States, a federal or a California certification on it, I believe they have to go to a referee first and get a referee sticker here in California. And that is in lieu of a under hood label to let you know all the emissions components that you have on the vehicle, timing if necessary, if it's OBD1 or 2 compliant, or not OBD1, but OBD2 compliant. But the initial smog for a gray market vehicle coming into the state, I believe, was it has to go to a referee center first if it didn't have a federal or a California emission standard.
Gotcha. And what's it like working with one of those referee centers? Are they all over the state, or is there just like one or two in the States? Tell me a little bit about what that process could look like for someone.
Referee centers are located at community colleges throughout the state. I believe there's one at Chabot in our area, Hayward. There's one in Livermore, and there's one in Sacramento, but they're at community colleges. To get a appointment, you have to go on asktheref.com asktheref.org and set up an appointment through them. I've been hearing lately it's hard to get appointments, more so for classic vehicles that are trying to become exempt for smog, that require the initial referee to be able to do so. But I can't verify that that's going on. I did check out the asktheref.org website, and they have a hiring flyer up there right now. So I'm not sure if they're shorthanded and trying to get through something, or even if these people that are trying to get these classic cars, if I haven't been able to verify that it's hard to get a referee smog. 7 years ago, my buddy got a classic car exempted, and he went through the referee smog system, and he had no problems. He was able to make an appointment, get the smog done, get the classic car exemption done within a month. It didn't take too long. So
interesting.
I've seen them fly through, but I've been hearing a lot of problems lately of having issues getting a referee to actually take an appointment.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, classic car, we're not talking 20 years for California. They don't define it as a certain year marker. It's a kind of other less specific definitions, or how would...
So for California, the classic car exemption that is currently going on, there's a lot to this one actually. So for classic car exemption, your vehicle has to be 35 years or older and have a classic car insurance on the vehicle. You get that initial referee smog, and you could be exempt. There's another caveat. If your vehicle is 25 years or older and you have a historical plate from DMV and get the smog from a referee, you could then be exempt from smog moving forward. That's a rule that's currently in place. The SB 712, have you heard about SB 712?
Yes, I have a question on that.
Yeah, just SB 712, will elaborate on that a little bit. What that is going to do is remove the smog requirement to be able to get into that program, and also remove the requirement to have the classic car insurance. So it looks like anybody with a vehicle that's over 30 years old will be able to go down to the DMV, and there will be a box or something on a form somewhere that says, do you have a classic car? Yes, I do. And that will make you be able to be exempt from smog if your vehicle is over 30 years old. That is going through legislation right now. It goes through appropriations on the 23rd or the 25th for Marathon Day. I believe the 23rd, because the 25th looks like it might be Sunday. But it has made it back to appropriations for Marathon Day, where the chair and vice chair will be the ones that are going to decide if it moves back on to the Senate floor.
Very cool. That could have some impact on the sprinters. Now, the sprinters, they're just starting to import the old ones from Europe. There's certain enthusiasts, kind of the early 2000 model sprinters, they kind of have a bit of a cult-like following, and they're just getting past that, I think, 20-year mark. I think that's more of like a federal import rule of some sort. So we're starting to see some of those, and that's kind of interesting because a lot of them have the steering wheel on the wrong side. So who knows what's going to happen there.
Are those all diesel as well?
Oh yeah, diesel.
Okay. Are all sprinters diesel?
Pretty much like 95%. Yeah, they brought the gas one in like late 2000s, like 2008 to 9. They might have had like very few gas ones You'll see
Okay.
this oddball gas, 3.5 gas liter engine. And then they tried to bring it back in like 2019 or 2020, and that lasted for like a year or two. And then they just like, no, we're only doing diesel. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is that is the last Mercedes diesel that they still make in the US. They got rid of all their sedan diesels, their SUV diesels, their weird hatchback diesels. They just
Okay.
have the Sprinter now, which makes it incredibly interesting because not all Mercedes technicians are aspiring to work on something that could is
Unique.
possibly moving out the door, So
Yeah.
it's very, don't assume that when you're going to the dealer that you're going to have a really good diesel tech there. You might have that old Eastern European dude that's been working on them since he was 8 years old, but you might not. And so it's a hit or miss there. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. What else is changing? So what they want to do, there's a lot going on with BAR right now. The Bureau of Automotive Repairs, they want to change the monitors to no monitors incomplete at all on the gas engines. They want to make it so that all the monitors have to be set, which is to make it way harder. There's another idea that they want to put the 96 to 99 year gas vehicles on the OBD2 test only. And that's with them taking into consideration of possibly SB 712 passing. There's another AB bill, I forget the number of it, that would make cars exempt as well. But I believe that AB bill has depleted itself somehow. But they're taking everything into consideration, looking at everything. So there's a lot that could be changing with the smog program moving forward, more so for gas powered vehicles than diesel powered vehicles.
Sounds like you're a little bit involved in it. Sounds like you care about it, quite care about not making things impossible for smog techs all over and consumers, to be fair. Tell us a bit about that.
I personally think 96 and newer should all go on the OBD2 system test. 95 and older do a sniffer test, and there's so few of them out there. We should start phasing those out anyways. Smog shops, a lot of them don't even want to touch them. A lot of technicians, it's hard to find a technician to smog the older vehicles, period, because they just don't know how to. There's a ton of lazy smog technicians out there that don't want to spend the extra 20 minutes to smog those vehicles as well. Then you run into test and repair facilities that don't want to pull a technician off of a job to have them smog a vehicle for 45 minutes for a third of what their hourly rate is. So it's becoming unreasonable to smog tailpipe wise the older vehicles. And if we could do 96 and newer on OBD2 for everything, it would just simplify the system. Everybody will be able to get a fairly cheap smog inspection no matter where they go. And it just makes the whole process easier for everybody.
Yeah, sounds like it would remove a lot of headaches.
The only problem, getting kind of detailed, would be like for say the 98 to 2002 Ford Expedition or Ford heavy duty, medium duty trucks and SUVs. Those are OBD1. So the new machines can't communicate with them, and we have to rely on the old Bar 97 test to actually do a tailpipe test on the gasoline powered ones. So in that case, that's the kind of hard part. Like, what would we do with those vehicles? Do we just visually say they're okay and you're on your way? But that would be the little bit of a caveat to have to figure out. Or even if we could add a four gas analyzer to the OBD2 test to do just a TSI test on the vehicles that are federally certified OBD1 vehicles or non-OBD2 vehicles that are in California that are newer than 96.
There's a few issues with the ideal solution that don't really apply to all use cases. Sort
Correct.
of. Yeah. One last question about the bar. I was on their website and they say we supply like repair assistance up to like about $1,500 if your car doesn't pass the smog. Is that just kind of a way of, is there any truth to that at all? Have you seen people actually be able to claim that amount or?
There's actually a lot of programs that bar or programs that are funded by CARB are out there that could help people, one, repair their vehicle, and two, if they want to get rid of their vehicle, the state will buy a failing vehicle as well. But you're talking about the Consumer Assistance Program. So if you fail a smog and you go to a repair shop, and I believe if it's over $500 for the repair, you can get a voucher for the shop to do that repair or a percentage of that repair.
Interesting. Is that a big headache of a process, or is it actually something that kind of works as long as you're willing to push the paperwork in the right places?
As long as you're willing to do the paperwork and take the time to do so, it's a fairly easy process. It's not like pulling teeth or anything too hard. And I believe you could do everything online now. You used to have to send it in, wait 30 days for a response, and then you would have to find a shop that would accept your voucher. But the way I think it works now is you could apply online. They'll tell you where you could take the vehicle, and they try to streamline it a little bit for you.
How many people actually make use of that? Is that pretty common knowledge here in California and I'm just learning about it? Or is that something that most people don't realize?
A lot of people don't know about that. They don't know about the vehicle retirement program. A lot of these programs, they don't make them well known. When I was smogging vehicles left and right, as a smog technician, you're supposed to tell people about these programs when they fail. A lot of technicians fail to do that part of informing the customer of what is the next step after you fail, or what could be done. If you can't afford it, there's options out there for you. And there's a lot of times where, like, if you need a catalytic converter in California, $1,400 on like a Honda Accord, a $500 voucher for somebody that can't afford much. It's people do complain it's not enough for the people that do need the assistance. But in my opinion, it's assistance. And if you qualify for it and want to take the time to do it, take it if you can.
Awesome. Yeah. Now, is the retirement program, is that kind of like is that real money, or is it just a few dollars north of the scrap metal of the vehicle? Or
it's so they have, I believe, 3 different tiers to the program now. It's $1,000, $1,500, and maybe $2,000. It depends on your income and the age of the vehicle. If you go on, what I do to get onto that program is I just go on Google and I'll do Bureau of Automotive Repair vehicle retirement, and it takes you right to the vehicle retirement page and gives you all that information. You fail smog, the vehicle has to be in your name for at least 120 days. It just pretty much has to be your normal daily driver, your normal vehicle, not a vehicle that you're trying to get back running again and like a junk. And they just upped the money that they give you. And what you do in that case is you fail your smog, you send your information in online now, then you take it to a pick and pull, like a dismantler pick and pull. I'm not sure if you've heard of those. Pick and pull locations are the certified locations to do vehicle retirement. When you take the vehicle there, it's got to have one headlight, a driver's seat, a windshield. Like, you could almost park your car out and then retire the vehicle. Personally, in the last 10 years, maybe a little bit more, you could retire one every, I believe it's 18 months. Okay. And I've retired 6 or 7 between me and my girlfriend and whatnot. Because when I was smogging cars, people would bring junkers, not good cars in, and they would fail smog. And I'm commuting from the Valley all the way to Berkeley, usually right off of a university. And so I don't want to drive a good car. I would, like, one of my last ones around 2015-ish was a Saturn. I bought it wow. Yeah. So I bought it and I just drove it until it got past the 120 days. I probably drove it for almost a year, probably right around there. and then it started not driving so well, and we smogged it. It failed. I applied for the program, sold it to the state for $1,500.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's great because I mean, you could probably purchase them for very cheap and you're essentially getting free miles out of them, right? And then maybe you made a little bit of profit, maybe you lost $100 or, it's, yeah. Yeah, that's a long
every
commute
single
too.
one of them, I ended up making a few
Yeah.
$100 at least,
Yeah.
because out there in the Bay Area, like I said, in Berkeley, you get a wide variety. So I've had a lot of like early '90 Honda Accords, a
Oh,
few
yeah.
mid '90s Honda Civics, and I don't care what the car looks like as long as I can get to work. I have my nicer car that I drive around town and take the kids around and stuff, but that was just to get to and from work. So it's like a rental car that I'm getting paid to drive,
Yeah.
and I just didn't care. Insurance was cheap, gas mileage was decent. If they needed any type of maintenance, like spark plugs or anything, they're really easy to do, and it was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could, if you're interested in any DIY help, emissions, components, locations, anything like that, check out Scotty's Hobbies, all over YouTube. Got hundreds and hundreds of videos as it is right now, and I'm there. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a text or a comment in any of the videos, and I'll get back to you guys.